Welcome in. This ordinary-looking Washington quarter has a few details most people never notice. Let's take a closer look and uncover what makes certain examples truly collectible. Step 1. There is something deceptively ordinary about the 1776 1976 Washington bicentennial quarter. It looks familiar. It weighs about what a modern quarter should weigh, and millions of Americans handled these coins during the celebrations surrounding the nation's 200th birthday. Yet this particular quarter is far more complicated than its face value suggests, because the same dual-dated design exists in multiple compositions, minting formats, grades, varieties, and genuine mint errors, creating an enormous difference between an everyday example and a truly collectible specimen. The coin was deliberately designed to commemorate 2 centuries of American independence, and its unusual reverse transformed a denomination that normally carried a traditional eagle into a one-year commemorative design featuring a colonial drummer. Even more interesting is the fact that the mint began striking the bicentennial pieces in 1975, meaning the date, 1776-1976, represents a 2-year production period rather than a conventional single-year issue. As we move deeper into the story, the real question becomes much more important than simply asking whether a quarter is old. What exactly separates an ordinary surviving example from one that collectors are willing to pursue aggressively? Later, we will examine authenticated auction results, including examples that have reached several $1,000s, and we will break down the precise combination of variety, error status, grade, strike quality, composition, and authentication that can turn an apparently common bicentennial quarter into a serious numismatic acquisition. The story begins with the United States preparing for a celebration, unlike anything the nation had experienced in modern times. The bicentennial program was intended to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and Congress authorized special circulating designs for the quarter, half dollar and dollar. Instead of simply placing a commemorative inscription onto the existing designs, the Mint held a national competition for new reverses, attracting 884 entries and eventually selecting 3 winning concepts. For the quarter, the winning design came from Jack L.R., whose colonial drummer represented the revolutionary spirit of the American founding. The obverse retained John Flanagan's familiar portrait of George Washington, but the date was transformed into the distinctive dual date, 1776-1976, visually connecting Washington's America with the nation celebrating its bicentennial 2 centuries later. Around Washington remain Liberty and In God We Trust, while the reverse places United States of America around the upper rim, the drummer and 13 stars at center, EPLURIBUS alongside the design, and quarter dollar below. That combination made the coin instantly recognizable, and because it entered circulation in enormous quantities, millions of Americans encountered the design without necessarily realizing that they were holding a historically significant one-year type. The normal circulating issues were struck at Philadelphia and Denver, while San Francisco produced collector versions, including both clad and 40% silver pieces. The familiar absence of a mint mark on Philadelphia coins and the D on Denver examples therefore became important identifiers, while an S indicates a San Francisco issue. Understanding the physical specifications is essential because genuine rarity cannot be separated from composition. A standard Philadelphia or Denver circulating bicentennial quarter is a copper-nickel-clad coin, consisting of an outer layer of approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded over a pure copper core. It measures about 24.3 millimeters across, weighs approximately 5.67 grams, and has a reeded edge. The 40% silver-clad versions produced at San Francisco are different. Their weight is approximately 5.75 grams, and their composition contains silver rather than the standard copper-nickel outer layers. That distinction matters because people sometimes assume that every 1776 1976 quarter contains silver, when in reality most circulating examples do not. The San Francisco silver issues were created for collectors and were sold in special bicentennial sets, while San Francisco also produced clad proofs. The production totals reveal just how enormous the program was. Philadelphia struck 809,784,016 clad quarters, while Denver produced 860,118,839, meaning the two circulation mints alone accounted for well over 1.6 billion pieces. San Francisco produced substantially fewer collector issues, including millions of clad proofs and silver-clad coins. That huge production explains why an ordinary circulated Philadelphia or Denver quarter is generally not rare simply because it carries the bicentennial date. In fact, the very abundance of these coins is one of the most important lessons for collectors. Age alone does not create rarity. A coin can be 50 years old and still be extremely common, while a particular era or die variety from that same production period can be genuinely scarce. This is where condition begins to change the equation dramatically. Most bicentennial quarters spent decades in pocket change, vending machines, cash registers, coin jars, and bank rolls, accumulating contact marks, scratches, dull surfaces, and small abrasions that can quickly push a coin away from the highest mint state grades. A coin designated MS-60 may technically be uncirculated, but that does not mean it is visually exceptional. At the upper end, MS-65, MS-66, MS-67 and beyond represent progressively more demanding standards involving surface preservation, luster, strike, eye appeal, and the absence of distracting marks. For this issue, the difference between a typical coin and an unusually pristine example can be enormous in collector terms, but it is important not to confuse a high grade with automatic four-figure value. PCGS records show how common the Philadelphia clad issue remains, with substantial survival estimates even in high grades, and its recorded auction result of $2,520 for an MS-64 specimen illustrates an important point. Auction prices are individual events, not universal price tags. A collector might encounter a superb certified piece, perhaps with exceptional eye appeal or a particular pedigree, and see competitive bidding push the result into the low thousands, while another ordinary uncirculated example may sell for only a small premium over face value. The same principle becomes even more important with the 1976 silver issues. Silver content adds a legitimate compositional distinction, but ordinary certified silver bicentennial quarters can still trade for relatively modest amounts. In other words, a collector should never assume that silver automatically means rare. The premium comes from the interaction of silver composition with grade, proof quality, scarcity at the highest levels, and actual market demand. The most fascinating possibilities emerge when we leave ordinary condition behind and begin examining varieties and mint errors. One of the most important documented varieties is the 1976 D double die obverse, cataloged as FS101, where genuine doubling can be seen on portions of the obverse design. This is fundamentally different from the flat, shelf-like appearance of mechanical or machine doubling. A true double die originates during die production and can create distinctive separation or notching in design elements, making attribution by a recognized variety specialist especially important. PCGS has specifically documented the 1976 D double die variety and notes that the otherwise heavily produced bicentennial quarter has a much scarcer variety showing meaningful obverse doubling. Recent auction records demonstrate why serious collectors pay attention. An authenticated FS101 example graded MS65 PCGS sold for $3,246 in a heritage auction, while an MS66 PCGS example reached $4,636 in July 2026. Those are not prices for ordinary 1976D quarters. They belong to specifically attributed double-die coins in certified grades. The distinction is critical because photographs on social media often label ordinary die deterioration, strike weakness, or machine doubling as a valuable doubled die. A serious examination should begin with magnification, but it should end with attribution, not speculation. The date, liberty, in God we trust, and other diagnostic areas must be examined for the characteristic shape and location of genuine doubling. If the evidence appears convincing, professional grading and variety attribution can provide the documentation needed to establish whether the coin truly belongs to the recognized collectible variety. Errors create another entirely different category of value because they represent mistakes that escape the normal production process. A quarter struck on the wrong planchet, for example, can be dramatically more interesting than a normal example because its weight, diameter, thickness, and design relationship reveal that the wrong blank entered the press. Heritage has documented a 1776-1976 bicentennial quarter struck on a Jefferson nickel planchet. The certified MS62 NGC example weighed only 5 grams and sold for $900 in December 2025. Other wrong planchet, off-center, clip planchet, broad strike, missing layer, and strike-through errors can also attract specialized collectors, but their values vary enormously according to the severity and authenticity of the error. Even an impressive-looking off-center piece should not automatically be valued at thousands of dollars. One heritage example of a 20% off-center bicentennial quarter was being offered in 2026, demonstrating that such pieces exist in the marketplace, but the degree of displacement, preservation, certification, and bidding competition all influence the final result. This is also where counterfeit awareness becomes extremely important. Because the bicentennial design is widely recognized and online claims about rare quarters are common, altered coins, artificially damaged pieces, and misidentified doubling can circulate among inexperienced sellers. A legitimate error should make physical sense. Weight should correspond to the claimed planchet. Diameter should support the theory. The edge should reveal appropriate characteristics, and the design should show evidence consistent with a minting event rather than post-mint damage. When a claimed error could potentially be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, professional authentication by a respected grading service is not an optional luxury. It is the evidence that separates an interesting-looking coin from a documented numismatic rarity. Preservation is equally important because the value of a genuinely scarce bicentennial quarter can be reduced by careless handling. Never clean a potentially valuable coin with polish, chemicals, abrasive cloths, baking soda, or household metal cleaners. Cleaning can leave microscopic scratches or unnatural surfaces that permanently reduce collector appeal and may result in a details grade rather than a straight numerical grade. Hold an uncirculated coin by its edges and avoid touching the fields with bare fingers, since oils and contaminants can affect the surface over time. For long-term storage, inert archival quality holders or professionally encapsulated certified holders provide far better protection than loose storage in paper envelopes or containers that can react with the coin. Environmental stability matters as well. Extreme humidity, temperature swings, and exposure to chemicals can create problems even when the coin begins in excellent condition. For a collector searching a group of bicentennial quarters, the smartest approach is systematic rather than emotional. Separate Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco examples. Identify whether the coin is clad or silver. Weigh questionable pieces accurately. Inspect the date and lettering under magnification. Examine the rims and edges for unusual strikes, and photograph anything genuinely unusual before attempting further handling. A coin that appears spectacular should be preserved exactly as found until its characteristics are understood. That approach is particularly valuable because some of the most interesting specimens are not necessarily the brightest coins in the box. A circulated quarter with a genuine, dramatic mint error can be far more desirable than a flawless-looking ordinary piece, while an apparently perfect coin without rarity may remain relatively inexpensive. Ultimately, the 1776 1976 Washington Bicentennial Quarter is a perfect demonstration of why professional numismatics is about evidence rather than headlines. The ordinary Philadelphia and Denver issues were produced in staggering numbers, so most examples are common and should not be represented as four-figure rarities. The San Francisco silver pieces are more specialized, but even certified high-grade examples can sell for comparatively modest amounts. PCGS auction records, for instance, show a PR70 deep cameo silver proof selling for $185.88, while other ordinary silver examples have traded for much less. At the other end of the spectrum, authenticated varieties and major errors can enter an entirely different market. The documented 1976D FS1, a one doubled die reaching $4,636 in 2026, provides a strong example of how attribution and grade can transform the economics of the coin, while the $2,520 Philadelphia result shows that even a regular clad issue can occasionally produce an unusually strong certified auction outcome. The lesson is not that every bicentennial quarter is valuable, but that every serious candidate deserves to be examined intelligently. Start with the mint mark, composition, weight, and condition. Then investigate varieties and errors only when the physical evidence supports them. Compare the coin against certified examples rather than internet rumors. Study actual auction results instead of asking prices, and remember that market demand can change with time. When authentication, rarity, preservation, grade, and collector competition all converge, a coin that once represented only 25 cents can become a remarkable piece of American numismatic history. And the real discovery is not simply finding a valuable quarter, but understanding exactly why the market considers that particular example different from the millions that look almost identical. Step 2. A 1965 Washington quarter can look almost impossibly ordinary. A familiar portrait of George Washington, a large eagle on the reverse, a reeded edge, and no mint mark to tell you where it came from. Yet this particular year sits at one of the most important turning points in American coinage, and hidden within the enormous production of 1965 quarters are condition rarities, recognized double-die varieties, special mint set pieces, and extraordinary errors that have attracted serious attention from collectors. The absence of a mint mark is itself part of the story, because the United States Mint deliberately suspended mint marks during the coin shortage of the mid-1960s in an attempt to discourage collecting and hoarding newly issued coins. That decision makes the 1965 quarter especially interesting. A coin that appears to be a straightforward Philadelphia product may actually have been struck at more than one facility, depending on whether it was a regular circulation strike or a special mint set piece. And because billions of these quarters entered the monetary system during a period of intense economic pressure, most surviving examples are not rare at all. The intrigue begins when you ask what happened to the tiny fraction that escaped circulation in exceptional condition, or carried a genuine die variety or mint-made error. Later, we will examine the evidence behind authenticated auction results and the factors that can move a 1965 quarter from an ordinary piece of pocket change into a serious numismatic collectible, including originality, surface preservation, strike quality, variety attribution, grade, eye appeal, and the level of competition among collectors. To understand why the 1965 quarter exists in its unusual form, You have to step into the United States of the mid-1960s, when the nation's coinage system was under extraordinary pressure. Rising demand for circulating money, changing metal prices, and widespread public interest in accumulating silver coins contributed to a shortage that became increasingly difficult for the Mint and Treasury Department to manage. The traditional Washington quarter was still being struck in a silver composition through 1964, containing 90% silver and 10% copper. But the Coinage Act of 1965 fundamentally changed the metallic structure of the nation's circulating quarters. Beginning with the new clad coinage, quarters became copper-nickel clad coins surrounding a pure copper core, eliminating the intrinsic silver content that had defined the denomination for generations. The transition did not happen overnight, and 1965 became the first regular year of the new clad Washington quarter. Production began on August 23, 1965, and continued into July 1966, while the date on the coins remained 1965. This extended production schedule was part of the Mint's effort to build a sufficient inventory of the new coins. At the same time, the Mint suspended mint marks, meaning regular 1965 quarters do not carry the familiar P, D, or S identifiers. Philadelphia and Denver both produced business strikes, while the San Francisco Assay Office produced 1965 quarters for the special mint set, also without a mint mark. The result is a fascinating numismatic situation in which the absence of a mint mark does not provide a complete answer about a coin's origin or production method. According to PCGS, the regular 1965 issue has a reported mintage of 1,819,717,540, while 2,360,000 quarters were struck for the special mint set. Physically, the regular 1965 Washington quarter introduced collectors to the new clad era in a very tangible way. The coin measures approximately 24.3 millimeters in diameter, weighs 5.67 grams, and has a reeded edge. Its outer layers consist of approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a pure copper center. That construction gives the coin a distinctive appearance when viewed from the edge. Instead of the uniform silver color associated with older 90% silver Washington quarters, the exposed edge reveals the copper core between the lighter-colored clad layers. The familiar obverse was designed by John Flanagan, featuring Washington facing left, with Liberty above, the date below, and in God W.E. Trust positioned to the left of his neck. Flanagan's portrait had already been part of American circulating coinage since 1932, so the 1965 issue did not introduce a new portrait, but it did place that classic design into an entirely new metallic era. The reverse shows the heraldic eagle with outstretched wings, arrows held in its talons, an olive branch beneath, United States of America around the upper perimeter, and quarter dollar below. The imagery carries familiar national symbolism. The arrows represent readiness to defend the nation, while the olive branch traditionally represents peace. Unlike the later bicentennial quarter, there was no special commemorative reverse in 1965. Its historical significance came instead from the composition change and the circumstances surrounding its production. Manufacturing the clad pieces required the mint to bond different metals into a single strip before blanks were punched, processed, annealed, and struck under enormous pressure. That production system created a new set of opportunities for unusual mint errors, while also making the preservation of pristine surfaces more difficult. The sheer quantity produced can make the idea of rarity seem contradictory, but that contradiction is exactly what makes the 1965 issue worth studying. A mintage exceeding 1.8 billion means the normal circulation strike is abundant, and many examples remain in collections, jars, drawers, and old accumulations. The vast majority are worth little beyond face value in circulated grades. Even many certified mint state pieces bring relatively modest premiums because collectors have access to substantial numbers of them. PCGS auction records show, for example, a certified MS-66 regular 1965 quarter selling for only $38 in a 2020 auction, illustrating how dramatically different the market can be from the sensational prices sometimes associated with the date. But condition rarity changes the equation. As a coin moves into MS-65, MS-66, MS-67 and higher grades, the standard becomes increasingly demanding. Professional graders examine contact marks, abrasions, luster, strike sharpness, tunning, surface originality, and overall eye appeal. A coin can be technically uncirculated yet unattractive because of heavy bag marks, dull surfaces, weak strike characteristics, or distracting discoloration. Conversely, a well-preserved coin with vibrant original luster and clean fields can become substantially more desirable. Color classification is especially relevant when tunning develops. Collectors may describe coins as brilliant when they retain their bright original appearance, while naturally toned examples can display attractive shades that sometimes add visual appeal. Artificially altered color is a different matter and can damage marketability. The most important lesson is that grade is not simply a number printed on a holder. It represents an assessment of preservation, and at the upper end of the grading scale, even tiny marks can determine whether a coin receives one grade or another. PCGS has recorded an MS-67 regular 1965 quarter selling for $705 at heritage auctions, with population information showing that significantly fewer examples occupy the highest certified levels than the enormous overall mintage would suggest. Then there are the varieties, and this is where the 1965 quarter becomes much more than a common clad issue. PCGS recognizes several important die varieties, including the 1965 double die obverse FS101, another double die obverse variety designated FS102, and a double die reverse variety cataloged as FS801. The FS101 is particularly famous because the doubling is strong enough to be genuinely dramatic. PCGS describes clear doubling across much of In God W.E. Trust, Liberty, the date, and portions of Washington's profile. This is not simply a blurry or damaged inscription. A genuine doubled die originates during die manufacture, when the working die receives misaligned impressions from the hubbing process. The resulting die carries duplicated portions of the design, and every coin struck from that die can reproduce the characteristic doubling. That is fundamentally different from machine doubling, which can create flattened, shelf-like distortions when a coin is struck and the die or planchet moves mechanically. Machine doubling generally does not carry the same collector premium. The FS1-2 is less dramatic, and that distinction matters because inexperienced searches often group every doubled-looking 1965 quarter together. Serious attribution requires matching the actual diagnostic features of a recognized variety, rather than simply noticing that a letter appears thick. The market confirms the importance of authentication. A documented FS1, one example graded AU58, brought $489 at Heritage in 2007, while Great Collections records an FS1, one graded MS64 selling for $1,518.75. Those results show why a legitimate variety can enter a completely different market from a normal quarter, but they also demonstrate why a claimed doubled die should never be valued from photographs alone. For a collector who believes a 1965 quarter may contain significant doubling, the safest path is careful comparison, with established diagnostics followed by professional attribution and grading. The special mint set coins introduce another layer of complexity because they were produced specifically for collectors and were not ordinary circulation strikes. The 1965 special mint set contained examples with specially prepared surfaces and stronger presentation characteristics than typical business strikes, although these pieces should not automatically be treated as conventional proofs. San Francisco produced approximately 2.36 million 1965 SMS sets, and because the coins lack mint marks, identifying one requires attention to its surface quality, strike, and overall appearance, rather than simply looking for an S. Exceptional SMS quarters can show unusually strong contrast between frosted devices and mirrored or semi-mirrored fields. And the finest examples can command substantial premiums when they receive prestigious designations from professional grading services. PCGS records an extraordinary $5,175 auction result for a 1965 SMS quarter, graded MS63 by ANACS at Heritage in January 2006. This is precisely the kind of result that must be placed in context. It does not mean a normal 1965 quarter is worth thousands of dollars. It represents an exceptional special mint set coin whose surfaces and characteristics placed it into a specialized collector market. The same principle applies to errors. During the transition from silver to clad coinage, the mint was working with different planchets, different production procedures, and enormous output. Genuine wrong planchet pieces and transitional errors from this period are known, but each must be authenticated individually. A supposed silver 1965 quarter deserves particular caution because the normal 1965 issue is clad, not silver. Weight, edge appearance, diameter, metal composition, and physical characteristics can all provide evidence, but none should be interpreted in isolation. A coin that appears silver-colored may simply have unusual tunning, environmental exposure, plating, or damage. Professional testing and certification are essential before assigning a premium value to an alleged transitional or wrong planchet error. That caution becomes even more important because the popularity of rare 1965 quarter stories has created a marketplace filled with misunderstandings. Counterfeiters and sellers of altered coins can take advantage of the fact that genuine varieties exist, while ordinary mechanical doubling, scratches, dents, stains, and postmint alterations can be presented as extraordinary errors. Authentication therefore begins with the basics. A normal clad 1965 quarter should be close to its standard 5.67-gram weight and 24.3 millimeter diameter, although legitimate manufacturing tolerances exist. The edge should show the characteristic reeded construction, and on a normal clad example, the copper core should be visible between the outer layers. A suspicious coin should be weighed on a calibrated scale, measured accurately, and compared with known genuine examples. Magnification is useful for examining lettering and design details, but lighting can create optical illusions that make ordinary surface irregularities appear like doubling. A professional grading service can provide a much stronger foundation because certification verifies authenticity and assigns a standardized grade, while recognized variety attribution can establish whether the coin belongs to a documented die variety. Preservation should begin before that process. Do not clean the coin, polish it, scrape its surfaces, or attempt to make it look better. Such treatments can permanently alter the surfaces and destroy the originality collector's value. Handle uncirculated coins by their edges, keep them away from fingerprints and harsh chemicals, and use inert holders designed for long-term coin storage. Stable temperature and humidity are preferable to damp environments, and certified coins should generally remain in their original holders unless there is a compelling reason for reholdering. A coin with attractive natural luster, untouched surfaces, and strong strike characteristics can become much more desirable than a supposedly improved coin, whose surfaces have been chemically manipulated. The enduring fascination of the 1965 Washington quarter ultimately comes from the fact that rarity exists at several different levels, and each level requires a different kind of evidence. The ordinary circulated quarter is historically important because it marks the beginning of the clad Washington quarter era, but its enormous production makes it common. A superior mint state example becomes more interesting because pristine coins are progressively harder to locate as grades rise. and documented auction results show that exceptional regular strikes have reached well beyond ordinary collector premiums. The recognized FS1, a one-doubled die, is different again. Its value comes from the scarcity and visibility of the die variety rather than simply its age. The special mint set issues form another collecting category, where surface quality and presentation can be extraordinarily important. And genuine mint errors occupy their own specialized market, where the exact nature of the error, authenticity, preservation, and certification can determine whether a coin attracts serious competition. This is why realistic values can range from essentially face value for a worn example to hundreds of dollars for a certified high-grade or recognized variety, while exceptional pieces can enter the $1,000 to $4,000 range or higher when rarity and collector demand justify it. The documented FS1, a 1MS64 result around $1,519, is a useful example of that middle to upper tier, while the $5,175 special mint set auction result demonstrates that exceptional pieces can move beyond that range under the right circumstances. None of these figures should be treated as a guaranteed price for another coin. Auction results are historical transactions, and the market changes with grade, certification, population, eye appeal, provenance, and competition at the moment of sale. The 1965 quarter therefore deserves to be studied not because every example is secretly valuable, but because it captures a decisive moment in American monetary history. It is the coin that arrived when silver disappeared from ordinary quarters, when the nation was struggling with a severe coin shortage, when mint marks were temporarily removed, and when a familiar Washington design entered an entirely new metallic era. Nearly 6 decades later, the most valuable discoveries are not created by wishful thinking. They emerge when careful observation meets documented rarity, professional authentication, exceptional preservation, and a collector willing to recognize why one seemingly ordinary quarter is genuinely different from the millions surrounding it. Step 3. At first glance, the 1997 D Washington quarter gives you almost nothing to suspect that collectors would ever study it closely. It is a familiar clad quarter, carrying George Washington on the obverse and the American eagle on the reverse, and unlike an old silver issue, it does not announce its age through a dramatic change in appearance. But place a handful of these quarters side by side and begin examining them the way an experienced numismatist would, and subtle differences suddenly become important. The sharpness of the strike, the freshness of the original luster, the number and location of contact marks, the preservation of Washington's portrait, the condition of the eagle, and even the tiny Denver D beneath the date. The 1997 D is not rare simply because it is nearly 3 decades old, and most examples remain ordinary coins, but exceptional specimens can become surprisingly competitive when collectors are building high-grade Washington quarter sets. The investigation becomes especially interesting because certified population data shows that the finest known pieces are dramatically scarcer than the enormous original production figure might suggest. Later, we will examine verified auction evidence and discover why one certified example reached a price that would be completely unrealistic for an ordinary circulated quarter, while other high-grade examples have sold for only modest premiums. The difference is not magic, and it is not a secret treasure hidden in every 1997 D quarter. It comes down to preservation, certification, grade, rarity at the top of the grading scale, originality, eye appeal, and the willingness of specialized collectors to compete for a coin that may look almost identical to thousands of others. The first clue is the tiny letter beneath Washington's portrait. The D identifies the Denver Mint, and for the 1997 D issue that mint mark is essential because it separates this coin from the Philadelphia issue struck the same year. The Denver Mint had been producing United States coinage for generations by this point, and by the late 1990s, it was operating as one of the country's major production facilities for circulating denominations. The 1997 D quarter was part of the final years of the classic Washington quarter design before the state quarters program transformed the reverse beginning in 1999. Its production occurred during a period of relative economic stability compared with the severe inflationary pressures of earlier decades. Although the United States was experiencing a rapidly expanding economy, technological growth, strong consumer activity, and increasing globalization. In everyday life, the quarter remained one of the most heavily used denominations in American commerce, appearing in vending machines, parking meters, cash registers, laundromats, arcades, and countless transactions. That heavy circulation is one reason the survival of truly pristine examples is more interesting than the raw mintage might suggest. According to PCGS, the Denver Mint struck 599,680,000 examples of the 1997 D quarter. That is an enormous number, and it immediately tells us something important. The date itself is not scarce. What can become scarce is a particular level of preservation. The coin was produced as a normal circulating quarter rather than as a commemorative issue, and millions entered commerce where contact with other coins quickly created abrasions and dullness. So when an experienced collector sees a 1997 D, the first question is not, is this old? It is, how well did this particular coin survive? PCGS.com, https://www.pcgs.com/coinfax/coin/1997D25C/5941 source equals chat.com. The physical examination begins with the metal. The 1997 D Washington quarter is a copper-nickel-clad coin, with outer layers containing approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a pure copper center. It weighs approximately 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and carries the traditional reeded edge. These specifications matter because composition, weight, diameter, and edge characteristics provide some of the earliest clues when authenticity is questioned. A normal coin should not be dramatically lighter or heavier without a plausible explanation, and the edge should reveal the characteristic clad construction rather than an obviously inconsistent metal structure. The obverse, designed by John Flanagan, presents Washington facing left, with liberty above his head, "In God We Trust" on either side of the lower portrait area, and the date below. The reverse displays the heraldic eagle with wings spread, arrows held in its talons, and an olive branch beneath, surrounded by United States of America and quarter dollar. The design carries a deliberate national message. The eagle represents the United States itself, while the arrows and olive branch traditionally evoke defense and peace. By 1997, these images had become deeply familiar to Americans because the Washington quarter had been circulating for more than 6 decades. Yet familiarity can work against the casual observer. When a design is seen thousands of times, people stop looking at its details. The collector does the opposite. Under magnification, the fields are examined for hairlines and contact marks. Washington's cheek and jaw are checked for abrasions. The lettering is inspected for unusual shapes or damage, and the reverse is studied for strike weakness, especially in the eagle's feathers and other high points. The objective is to determine whether the coin has merely survived or has survived exceptionally well. That distinction becomes clearer when we examine the journey from the coin press to the collector's cabinet. During production, large coils or strips of clad metal were processed into planchets, which were then prepared and fed into presses where enormous pressure forced the Washington and eagle designs into the metal. A circulating coin was never intended to emerge from this process with the same pristine presentation expected from a carefully handled collector proof. After striking, coins entered bulk handling, counting, bagging, transportation, and distribution. Each stage created opportunities for contact marks before the coin ever reached a cash register. Once released into circulation, the damage could accelerate rapidly. Quarters routinely collide against one another, slide across hard surfaces, and become mixed with keys and other objects. On a 1997 D, the first signs of wear may appear as a loss of sharpness on the highest portions of Washington's hair and cheek, or on the reverse design, while circulated examples gradually lose the bright cartwheel effect produced by original mint luster. This is why collectors distinguish between circulated and mint state examples. A coin graded MS-60 through MS-70 has not received a numerical grade simply because it looks old or new. The grading process evaluates preservation and overall quality, with higher grades requiring increasingly impressive surfaces, strike, luster, and eye appeal. An MS-65 coin can be attractive and strongly collectible, while an MS-67 demands a much cleaner combination of characteristics. At MS-68, the standard becomes exceptionally demanding. PCGS currently records the 1997 D regular strike as reaching MS-68, and its auction archive lists an authenticated MS-68 example sold by Heritage Auctions for $978 on January 7, 2004. PCGS.com, https://www.pcgs.com/auction prices/details/1997 DMS/5940 1 Udum source equals chat.com. That result is fascinating precisely because it is not representative of the average coin. It is evidence of what specialized collectors can pay for an exceptionally high-grade certified survivor. Now imagine placing that MS-68 coin next to a normal 1997 D pulled from circulation. Both have the same date. Both have the same Denver mint mark. Both are made from the same basic clad composition. Both show the same designs. Yet the market can treat them as completely different objects. This is the concept of condition rarity, and it is central to understanding modern clad coins. A quarter with millions of surviving examples can still become difficult to obtain at the highest grade because most pieces were exposed to handling, transportation, storage, and circulation. PCGS's published certification data for this issue shows 123 examples at MS-67, with 19 graded higher in the reference population report, illustrating that the upper end of the certified population is much smaller than the overall production figure. PCGS.com, https://www.pcgs.com/auction prices/items/1997 D25C/5940 1/7 quintillion 74 quadrillion 758 trillion 800 billion 617 million 504,780 Udum source equals chat.com. Even MS-67 coins, however, should not automatically be assumed to be four-figure pieces. The auction record contains MS-67 sales of $52, $46, and $58 from David Lawrence Auctions, while another certified MS-67 example sold for $15 at Great Collections. CGS.com, https://www.pcgs.com/auction prices/items/1997 D25C/5940 1/7 quintillion 74 quadrillion 758 trillion 800 billion 617 million 504,780 Udum source equals chat.com. These results are valuable because they establish a reality that online coin stories sometimes obscure. Grade alone does not guarantee an extraordinary price. A collector might encounter an attractive MS-67 and reasonably expect a premium, perhaps in the tens or low hundreds depending on certification and market conditions, while an exceptionally scarce top-grade coin can attract far stronger competition. A hypothetical market range around $1,000 to $1,700 would therefore only make sense for an unusually desirable, authenticated example at the extreme end of preservation, or with an additional recognized rarity, not for an ordinary 1997 D quarter. The difference between those categories is exactly what the collector must prove before assigning a serious value. The next stage of the investigation is variety and error attribution, and this is where discipline becomes more important than excitement. Experienced collectors inspect the date, mint mark, lettering, rims, devices, and fields for evidence of something created during the minting process rather than afterward. A genuine double die can show distinctive, repeatable design separation caused during die production, while machine doubling generally produces flatter, shelf-like distortion. A damaged letter, scraped surface, die deterioration, or postmint contact mark is not automatically a collectible variety. The same caution applies to alleged off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, struck through errors, missing clad layers, or other dramatic-looking abnormalities. Genuine mint errors can be valuable, but they must make physical sense and be supported by the characteristics of the coin itself. For example, an alleged missing clad layer error should be examined for the correct relationship between exposed copper and the rest of the planchet, while a supposed wrong planchet strike should be tested against weight, diameter, thickness, and edge characteristics. I would not assign a specific major error value to the 1997 D without reliable certification and an identifiable documented specimen, because that would turn an investigation into speculation. Counterfeit awareness is equally important. A valuable coin can be altered, plated, artificially toned, or manipulated to imitate a rarity, and a genuine common coin can be damaged after leaving the mint in ways that look dramatic under poor lighting. Professional authentication, therefore, becomes increasingly important as the claimed value rises. A certified MS-67 or MS-68 coin already has a documented grading history, while an uncertified coin supposedly worth several $1,000s deserves independent examination before any purchase decision. Collectors should compare suspicious examples against known genuine pieces, use accurate scales and calipers when appropriate, examine the edge, and avoid relying solely on photographs or seller descriptions. The guiding principle is simple. An unusual appearance is a reason to investigate, not proof of rarity. Surface quality deserves its own investigation, because two coins carrying the same numerical grade can still appeal very differently to collectors. Original mint luster should flow naturally across the fields as the coin is tilted beneath light, producing the familiar cartwheel effect associated with an untouched mint state surface. Brightness alone, however, does not prove originality. A coin can be polished or chemically treated and appear unusually shiny, while actually becoming less desirable. Collectors also pay attention to color. A brilliant example may retain much of its original appearance, while naturally toned coins can develop shades ranging from pale gold to deeper hues depending on storage conditions and environmental exposure. Attractive original toning can sometimes enhance eye appeal, but artificial color is generally viewed very differently. Strike quality matters too. If the dies were not delivering complete detail, certain areas may appear softer even though the coin never circulated. On the reverse, the eagle's feathers and surrounding details deserve careful attention. On the obverse, the portrait and lettering can reveal how strongly the coin was struck. When examining a potential high-grade candidate, it is useful to rotate the coin rather than stare at it under one fixed light source. Marks that disappear from one angle may become obvious from another, and luster breaks can reveal contact damage that is difficult to see in a photograph. Storage then becomes part of the value story. A coin with exceptional surfaces should never be cleaned with household chemicals, abrasive cloths, metal polish, or improvised treatments. Hold it by the edges, keep it away from fingerprints, and use inert, coin-safe holders. Stable environmental conditions are preferable to damp storage, and certified pieces should generally remain encapsulated. The goal is preservation, not improvement. The best treatment for an already exceptional coin is often simply leaving it alone. The final question is why a coin struck in a quantity approaching 600 million can still generate serious collector interest decades later. The answer lies in the structure of the market. The ordinary 1997 D quarter is common, and a circulated example normally has little reason to command a dramatic premium. Even certified MS-66 examples have recorded relatively modest transactions, including a $13 auction result in 2009 and a $69.99 online sale in 2022, demonstrating how widely individual market outcomes can vary. CGS.com, https://www.pcgs.com/auction prices/items/1997D25C/5940 1/1,109,823,900,163,177 Item source equals checked. Com. But the highest quality survivors occupy. Different collecting niche. PCGS's documented MS-68 auction record of $978 is the clearest verified evidence that a top-grade example can cross into a substantially higher market category, while the many lower-grade sales prove that this result should never be applied to every coin bearing the same date and mint mark. PCGS.com, https://www.pcgs.com/auction prices/details/1997 DMS/5941 Item source equals checked. Com. In today's collecting environment, a realistic four-figure valuation would require something exceptional, such as an authenticated top-grade specimen with genuinely scarce population status, a properly attributed major variety, or a significant mint error, not merely a shiny coin found in pocket change. Depending on those factors, specialized pieces might enter ranges around $1,100, $1,850, or even above $3,000 when competition is strong. But those figures are examples of how rarity and demand can interact rather than promises about the value of any particular quarter. The 1997 D Washington quarter is therefore best understood as a lesson in modern numismatics. Mintage tells you how many were made, but survival tells you how many remain in a particular condition. Grade tells you how well a coin survived. Certification helps establish authenticity and quality, and the market ultimately decides how intensely collectors compete for the finest examples. When you examine one yourself, begin with the date and the Denver D. Then move methodically through strike, surfaces, luster, color, lettering, design details, edge, and possible mint-made abnormalities. Most will turn out to be ordinary, and that is perfectly consistent with the history of the issue. But when an example possesses the right combination of originality, exceptional preservation, recognized rarity, and documented certification, the investigation changes completely. And suddenly a quarter that once passed through an American cash register, without a second thought, becomes a precisely preserved snapshot of late 20th century American coinage.